Welcome back to Women Are Magical by Unicorn Landing. My name is Candace, and I am your host, and I am also the founder of Unicorn Landing, which is a lifestyle app made for women in the lifestyle to connect with other women and explore their desires.
Thank you for listening to the Women Are Magical podcast by Unicorn Landing. Remember, this content is for 18 and over, and make sure you hit that like and subscribe button.
Today, we're talking about rewriting that good girl narrative, letting go of the shame, religious guilt, and societal expectations that are oftentimes put on women, and kind of breaking those stigmas that come along with either joining the lifestyle, exploring your sexuality, or just being curious about sex in general. I think a lot of us, are raised very religious or conservative, or there's just a lot of shame behind the guilt or behind desires or wanting to express your desires. And so this episode, we're going to kind of dive in and talk about all of those things and kind of how to break away from those societal norms and things you can do, self-talk, to kind of get yourself comfortable with being open about your desires. So we are talking about the good girl, the version of us that learned how to behave, how to please, how to be chosen, and how to stay quiet about wanting more. So this episode may bring up some feelings and, things that are uncomfortable and that you may have been through in your past. But it's good to kind of think about those things and what you want to get out of it and breaking away from those things. And this is a judgment free zone. And just know there's nothing wrong with you for having these thoughts or these desires. So also want to say that this episode isn't necessarily even anti-religion. We are talking about, I will talk about a little bit of my religious trauma and breaking away from those religious stigmas and things that come with it, but it doesn't mean you are anti-religion. It's not about abandoning those values necessarily. It's about choosing which values still belong to you. I know a lot of people who still are in the lifestyle or are openly bisexual, even gay, and are religious. It doesn't mean just, I don't know. I think that we're just taught it's either one way or not. It's very black and white. And I don't think religion for every person is necessarily black and white. And those are, again, very personal beliefs. And everybody kind of has to make those decisions for themselves. But this episode isn't necessarily anti-religion or trying to steer people from being religious. I just want to talk about, choosing what values still belong to you. So this good girl persona that women are supposed to, portray, it comes from a very early age. We're always taught to be, not be too sexual, not be too much, very agreeable. Women are supposed to be modest. There's a lot of like the purity culture. And a lot of people follow that, or they're like the trad wives or things. And the way that people want to live is totally their choice. And I think that's where I struggle the most is like, if somebody does want to live that way, that's absolutely great for them. I think we're very lucky we have the freedom of choice. And I think a lot of that is trying to be taken away from women in society, not, by men, by the government, lots of different things. And I think that we need to, it doesn't mean that everybody has to live a certain way. I'm obviously very open about my sexuality and open about being bi, and, people have the right to live the way that they want to live. But I even think that there's people out there who are way more sexual than me and way more open about it and free and, naked and, do things that I'm not comfortable with. It doesn't mean that I think they're bad people or there's anything wrong with them. I just think that everyone needs to be able to express their desires and live the way they want to live. So a lot of this is put onto us at a very young age. So as we're just kind of almost brainwashed, really. And not necessarily I'm talking about just religious brainwashing, but just in society in general. Like, girls are from a very young age taught to not be slutty or sleep around, or it's too much, or they're selfish, or, guys are always giving girls a hard time about body count. And like, girls just get that slut, you know, name or whatever from a very early age. And so it's just taught for a very early age that we're rewarded strictly for our good girl behavior and not any of the outside of the norm or bad girl behavior. So these rewards that we have gotten our whole life, meaning just praise or, oh, she's such a good kid, she's such a good girl. We're taught that from so young that it just becomes part of our identity. And anything outside of that can be scary and feel wrong and feel dirty and feel shameful. So, desire and shame can be paired very early on in our life because of this. So, and having any sort of sexual desires, anything like that is shameful. So, a lot of us will bury those feelings and those thoughts down for a very long time. And it can cause a lot of anxiety and angst in women because we have these thoughts that we hide from ourselves, from our partners, from friends, from family for years. And it can cause a lot of like inner turmoil. We're taught that sexual curiosity is dangerous. There is a lot of, I think sex safety needs to be taught from, a pretty early age, especially nowadays in our society. But it doesn't need to be taught as like danger and wrong. I think a lot of people are just scared to talk about it with younger kids, and not that young, but like when they start to, when you're in junior high, high school, things like that. And I think it just needs to be kind of talked about in not such a dangerous, shameful way. Wanting women, especially, can be seen as very sinful. If you're, raised in a religious family, it can cause a lot of confusion. It's very scary to our society. I think it's a little better in some areas. It kind of depends on where you live. But I think that being open about your sexuality can be a little bit dangerous. I actually have a daughter that is gay. And, sometimes I do worry about her safety. We live in a pretty conservative state. We live in our town itself is not super conservative. And we have a lot of, it's pretty open and a pretty blue area. And there's a, decent LGBTQ community. And she goes to a college, a university. But I just still worry sometimes about her safety. And it's sad that, we live in a society where you even have to think about your safety or anything like that for just being open about your desires and who you love, which is a whole nother topic. But the shame is put on us, sin is put on us from an early age. And so kind of like trying to break out of those feelings and almost like learning to not care what other people think is really difficult. And I know a lot of that does come with age. I know at this point in my life, I give a whole lot of less fucks than I used to give. But for a long time in my 20s and even like 30s, early 30s, there was just no way that I could say I was bisexual out loud and feel like I wouldn't be shamed or lose family or lose friends or lose my partner. And so, yeah, it was a lot of inner turmoil that I dealt with for a very long time. So feeling shame isn't proof that something is wrong with you. It's proof that you were taught not to want it. It was proof that you were taught not that it was wrong, because there is no shame. There should be no shame behind desires or your sexuality or anything like that. That is all something that we are taught and we are brainwashed from a very early age. So leaning more into like this midlife, and I'm not talking about everybody in here is like in their midlife, everybody listening, but in your 30s, 40s, that's typically when this stuff later in your life can kind of start to come out. And why is it, you're having a little more self-awareness. I think as you get older, you start to care a lot less. Your kids are growing up, so it's a little bit easier to focus on yourself and your own desires. I know for me personally, my kids are a teenager, and then one is in college. And so I have the ability I have a little bit more free time. I can be more open. I don't, you don't have little kids hanging on you and toddlers and, routines and all of that. And so you can kind of take the time for yourself and thinking about, the things that you want. And, and I don't know, at this point in my life, I just had the opportunity to be a little more open. I went through a divorce several years ago and, met a partner who was very supportive of my sexual desires and things that I wanted to explore, which is huge. And it was a slow process. It's not like I just all of a sudden came out and was open to everybody, but I have supported friends, and I always say I baby stepped into it. I tiptoed into this whole like, oh, I could experiment with women or even being active on social media. And it's definitely taken me, a couple years to get to the point where I'm just so open and I have no shame around my feelings or desires. We also have the less need for approval, I think, at this point in our lives. And once I kind of have thrust myself into this community, the lifestyle community, and meeting a lot of other women like me. That was, the kind of the reason behind Unicorn Landing. A lot of people just assume it's for couples to meet unicorns and that's it. But that's not was my original intent behind it. I struggled to find women like me, women that wanted to explore their desires and their sexuality, and they were new and they were questioning things and just making a lot of connections. And that's exactly what I've done. I mean, I have made so many friends through Unicorn Landing and my social media and putting myself out there. And it makes it a lot easier to feel less shameful about things or to feel more normal when you meet other people that are like you. And you see that there's so many other women out there that are wanting to explore this, explore the lifestyle or their sexuality or whatever. It just makes it a lot, I don't know. I feel a lot less shame to know that I'm like, I need validation from other people. Not that you should, that's not necessarily healthy behavior, but when you have validation for other people and seeing people like you, it can just make things a lot more comfortable and you feel a lot less like there's something wrong with you. So coming out, as bisexual to a partner, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're being rebellious if you're trying to get rid of that good girl narrative. It just means that you're kind of reclaiming who you are and you want to just you're taking control of your desires and no longer letting society, religion, your family, anything like that tell you what you can or can't do. Exploring bisexuality later in life can be very normal. It's okay to have it's okay to be married and still have curiosity with your and your long-term partners. I've talked on my last episodes, a couple of them, about coming out to your partner, the struggles, that may come with that. But having a supportive partner can be huge when you're wanting to explore. And then also it's okay that you don't have to, just because you want this like novelty of the lifestyle or exploring with women, doesn't mean you're necessarily leaving your love, leaving your partner and not also wanting love. I get asked a lot, like, why are you still married then and people don't realize that it's the most happy, healthy relationship I've ever been in because I'm finally being myself. I'm finally being open about these desires and not trying to hide who I really am. And it makes things really non-toxic and healthy and happy when you have this open line of communication and a supportive partner. So I think there's a lot of religious guilt. Talk a little bit about like religious and moral guilt and things that, you were raised. And there's a lot of fear that is put into when you're in like religion and, it's evil, you're going to go to hell. And like, that's just kind of, there's a lot of fear. Faith can be very fear driven, which is not healthy at all. And again, it's okay to be religious, but it doesn't need to be such. People are so scared they do something wrong, they're instantly going to go to hell. And I think that is where a lot of the toxicity from religion comes from, because that's not the case. And you can still be religious, believe what you want to believe, but be open about different things. I think morality we need to focus on, instead of just it's so put on women that you're shameful, you're wrong. But what happens if I'm a good person? I feel like I'm a very good person. I do a lot of really good things. I am morally very kind. I do a lot of things to give back. I'm truthful. Like, there's just so many good things about me. So it's hard when it's like I've never murdered anybody. I've never like actually what people would look at are like big sins. And I feel like I am a good person and a good member of society. And so why is me being open about these sexual desires that are very normal and natural to want to explore things? And I'm not saying it's natural to like everybody has to be bi, anything like that. But I'm just saying like even the lifestyle or sex in general, like those are natural desires that we as humans all have. And so why can't we look at it in more of a healthy, safe way and consensual and, being honest and truthful with your partner and living authentically? I don't think there's anything wrong. I don't think it's something that religion should shame if you're still being a good person. So you can still be ethical, loving, faithful, and still be deeply erotic without being a bad person. And I think that that's kind of where that narrative that that a lot of people are trying to change, and get like reminding yourself of that when you're trying to break out of this like good girl narrative, is that it's still okay to be loving, faithful, but still be erotic and sexual and open to your desires. So when you have your religious beliefs or, societal beliefs, and it doesn't all have to be religion, but let's just say like things that you were taught that were sinful or wrong. when you're those desires that you're struggling with, maybe do they bring you closer to yourself or further away? Do they make you feel, and I know for me, it just like the more I tried to, you know, hide and suppress these feelings, I just got more and more upset and frustrated about who I was and society. And I was angry. Like I was depressed, I was angry, and I couldn't ever really quite put into words why. But I was not all these, thoughts and these feelings that I grew up with were not making me feel good about myself and feel closer to myself. They were just pushing me away. And do they create fear or does it create peace? That's the other thing you have to think about. Again, putting those pressures and shame on yourself, if it's just fear that you're facing and you're so scared that you're going to let somebody down, hurt somebody, but you're not focusing, all those are external fears. You're worried about, you know, upsetting God, you're worried about upsetting your family, you're worried about upsetting your partner, all of that. But are you thinking about how you feel, and are they bringing you internal peace? And so those are some questions to kind of think about, like, whether what desires are bringing you peace or fear. So let's talk about redefining what really a good woman is. So we're talking about a lot of good girl and the way that we are raised, but let's talk about what a good woman is. And a good woman listens to her body. She tells the truth even when it's messy. She chooses desires with integrity. She's, listens to other people, listens to herself, listens to those around her, respects other people, believes in consent, and a good woman doesn't disappear to keep other people comfortable. And I think it's so powerful when you finally break through from those like feelings that you're stop caring. Like this is the most powerful and open and authentic I've ever felt. And I might be living a way that a lot of people don't agree with. And when it comes to the lifestyle and my sexuality, but I feel good. And life is short. Life is so fucking short that you need to do what makes you happy. And it doesn't mean you need to be selfish and you need to throw away your relationships. And again, throw away even your faith. It just means that it's okay to explore both and express your desires. Another good question that I made a note here of, but it says, if no one were watching, not your family, not society, not religion, anything. If nobody was watching, what do you want? And that's how you should be living your life. Obviously, if it's safe and consensual and like healthy. Ugh. If you have some deep desires, maybe seek therapy. But what do you want? What would you do if nobody was watching? Because so many of us stop what we want because we're so concerned what other people are going to think. So it's okay to give yourself permission or gentle permission to explore these things. You don't have to necessarily act on anything right away. It doesn't, just because you're curious, it doesn't mean like you're just going to go off the deep end and all of that. It's okay to kind of start doing your research and talking to your partner, talking to friends, talking to a therapist about these desires that you are feeling. It's not like you just have to make a decision right away and, throw it out there. And you don't owe anybody a label. I think bisexuality, or just sexuality in general, you don't need to label yourself if you're not comfortable with that or you're not ready. Having desires doesn't necessarily mean that you're bisexual. You would date women, or that you want to be, even if you're having thoughts about the lifestyle, all of that. It doesn't mean that you need to put a label on it right away. It took me a long time to realize, like, am I bisexual? Am I just bi-curious? I don't know. And you don't need to be bold and vocal about your sexuality. You don't owe anybody anything. And so it's okay to have these thoughts and feelings, but I'm talking about like this internal dialogue and working with yourself and saying these things to yourself and being comfortable. It's not like you need to just all of a sudden, like, okay, you decided that you were bi, you like women, you want to explore this, whatever that may be. You don't need to make a social media account and label it and tell everybody you know. No, you don't owe anybody that explanation. What you do behind closed doors, what you enjoy, your sexual desires, fantasies, all of that are very personal. And that could be between you and your partner, or if you're single, it could just be you. It doesn't need to be something that you have to share with everybody and just slap these like labels on. And some people like labels, and it can make things easy on apps, things like that, but it's not something that you have to do. And I think a lot of people get worried, like, oh God, I admitted that I'm bi, now everyone's gonna I'm gonna lose. You don't have to tell anybody. You don't tell your kids. You don't have to tell people that you having these sexual desires. You're, but internally, you're allowed to say to yourself, you're allowed to want women. I'm allowed to be married and curious. I'm allowed to be sexual and spiritual, and I'm allowed to change. It's okay to make this shift kind of, at some point in your life when, and it can be a slow shift, it can be a quick shift, whatever feels comfortable to you, but it's okay to say those things to yourself and not feel, again, like you have to just blurt them out to the world. So again, just kind of wrapping up, like I don't know, society just tells women a lot that it's just sexual desires and being a good girl is put on us so much. And kind of just, it's a lot of self-talk, a self-work. I always tell people that a lot of people, when they get into the lifestyle or they're curious about it, a lot of people I talk to are married women. So majority, obviously, for couples, is you think that you're going to have to do a lot of work with your couple with your partner, which you do. And everyone talks about like all this, you're going to therapy, you're going to counseling or, communication with your partner, talking about this, talking about that. But people don't talk about the internal struggles that will bring up, the internal dialogue, the personal growth that it takes, the things that I have had to do to work on myself to make myself a better partner, to be happy with myself, to love myself. So yeah, you're not breaking any rules by exploring this, being curious. You're just breaking the silence. And the silence, and again, it's not silence that you need to say it out loud, but silence to yourself, because you've been hiding those internal thoughts for so long. And, you've maybe been watching, girl on girl porn for years and have had these desires and thought, oh, there's something wrong with me. Why is this what I'm into? But finally giving yourself permission to say those things, being open about it. And the woman you're becoming isn't less, she's just more whole. You're not diminishing yourself and diminishing the way you were raised, your, spirituality, anything like that. You're becoming more. You're adding more to your life and more dimension to who you are. So just take time to reflect on all of that. Journaling can always help. Therapy helps. Sharing anonymously. It's great. People can always send me a little message if you just want to tell. I've had so many women reach out to me and just be like, you inspired me to be open about my sexuality, to myself, and that it was okay to share, and that there's people out there like me. Or just sit with that feeling, think about it, and try to let go of those fears and those thoughts, and those thoughts that it's wrong and it's shameful, because it's not. There's nothing wrong with you. You absolutely are allowed to have these desires. It is just society and brainwashing that has put this on so many women for years that we're doing something wrong. But I promise you're not. So yeah, I just encourage everyone to really explore their desires, because I promise you will change your life. So thank you for listening to Women Are Magical, and I'll see you at the next episode.
Thank you for listening to Women Are Magical by Unicorn Landing. If you want to check out the Unicorn Landing app, download it on Google Play or iOS and use the code UNICORN7, capital letters for the word unicorn, the number 7, for a free week trial.